Hello, good morning, and welcome to our very first virtual open house. This is Katarina, and today we'll begin by making our men's tags. In your package, you will find that you have a couple of sentiment strips. You'll have a couple of tags, so one will be embossed for you, and then there's two plain ones. So we're just going to work on two of them today, and then you can go ahead and create your own afterwards. So the two tags here, how we're going to start is just by cutting off the corners. So all you want to do is take your scissors, and if you like, you can always measure. I'm just going to use my grid on the back here to put some spots of where I'm going to cut. Okay, so I'm just going to put a line here in the center and here, and then I will just measure roughly to the center here as well as here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and cut the corners off with my scissors, simply just like that. And then to make the hole, if you don't have a hole punch, you can always run it through your die cut with the smallest circle die. I just have a hole punch, so I'm just going to eyeball the center and punch a hole. So now that I have one done, to make it easier, I'm just going to line that up with my second tag and then trace that so I can now trim the second tag. So you're just going to go ahead and cut that with your scissors. If you have a die cut and you want to make the edge fancy, you can always go ahead and run that through your die cut with your edger. So that's how we're going to start our tags. So you can see that the one tag in the background here is embossed. So the embossing folder that I used for that is this letter board from Marianne Design. I'm just going to open this up so you can see everything that comes with it. So it comes with this really neat embossing folder that makes paper look like it's corrugated. It's meant for the letter boards like when you see outside in front of stores and stuff with messages. It also comes with the border and an alphabet and number die set. So that's what I used on the second tag here to put your classic. I used this die cutting alphabet set to do that. So I went ahead and I embossed that one for you guys. And now we're just going to add a little bit of color. I'm going to use a little smoothie here to add some Versaclear fallen leaves. So your sentiment is stamped in this color, so I'm just going to use the same color to highlight the background of my tag here today. So I'm just going to throw a scrap piece of paper under there so I don't get my work surface all dirty. And I'm just going to add the color to the one tag that's embossed here. So I'm going to take my smoothie and then tap it off to my scrap paper so that the color is not too intense. And I'm going to go ahead and add some color around the edges of this tag. And you can add as much or as little color as you want. So for the sample that we're working on here, I'll just bring it in. I did add most of the color here on the top and a little bit on the bottom. You can see that the rest of the tag is going to be pretty much covered. So I just wanted to highlight that corrugated look on the background of this tag. So I'm just going to add a little bit of color here on the bottom. It's always best to start with a little bit of color and then add more instead of going in with a really heavy hand and adding too much ink. Okay, so I'm just going to blend that out just a little like that, and I think that's good. So now we have our sentiment strip here, and all you're going to do is take your strip and do a random tear. So this is the fun part. So you're going to just randomly tear that up, and now you have a torn edge there for your sentiment. And I'm going to take my same smoothie and add a little bit of color to the edge of that sentiment that I just tore. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a vintage look. You don't want it to get too dark so you take away from the sentiment, but I just didn't want it to be a clean piece of paper with no dimension on it. So that's why I'm just adding a little bit of ink around the edges just to give that a little bit of a vintage look there. Okay, so also in your package, now we're done with the ink blending, so I'm just going to move this out of the way. Also in your package, you have received 2 different sheets of paper. So everyone has a different pattern. This comes from the 6x6 men's patterned paper. And so for this sample here, I used, obviously the patterned paper had a little bit of red and stuff in there. So that's why I have those, I just used the same sheet of paper there. So what we're going to do to make our tags today is whatever sheet that you want to use, you're going to use your tag and then just roughly cut the same size. I'm just going to use my scissors here and trim that up. Right, and then I'm going to just randomly tear my paper. So for the sample here, I just have a random pattern in the background. So I'm just going to tear that. You can go in and tear a little bit extra here and there, just depending on what it looks like and how you feel. So I just did really a random one, so I cover a little bit of the background. So I'm just going to adhere that there. And then I have my sentiment on the bottom here. And also in your package you received the circle car elements. So I do have a couple of samples here, and they come with images of cars or the speedometer, things like that. Some sentiments that kind of go along with the car themes, and this is just another piece of patterned paper. So for this tag here, I believe I want to use this car here, so I'm just going to cut that out with my circle die. And that's the thing, if you don't have a circle die, you can always cut this by hand. So I'll just show you real quick that it doesn't have to be precise because this tag is more of a tattered look. If you cut this tag out by hand, then you won't get a perfect circle and it'll look a little more tattered, kind of matching the style of the tag. So you can either use a pair of scissors to cut it out, or if you want a circle die, we also have like the distressed circle if you wanted to use that. So then here's another element that I'm going to attach to my tag. And then that's about it for the first tag. So we're going to go ahead and attach everything then while we have that all set up. So I had lay things out how you want it. I mean, you could always switch it around if you wanted to have your car element down there and your sentiment up here. That will always work. So whatever is most pleasing to your eye, absolutely go ahead and change that design if you feel like it. So I'm just going to adhere my elements here just using some tape. So I'm just going to flip these parts over, and then I'll use 3D foam tape to adhere my circle element. So I'm just going to use some Be Creative tape here. I like to use this tape because I never have any issues of it coming unhered or anything like that. So it seems to be my go-to tape for now. Also available at our store. If you don't have any tape, I do recommend that you do purchase something like this. Okay, another little tip, if you have short nails or you're really difficult to work with your hands, you can always use your pokey tool to help take off that release paper on the back. So just go ahead and take that off. I'm going to take the release paper off my sentiment strip here as well. Okay, so now my elements are ready to adhere, and I'm going to put some foam tape on the back of this circle element. Okay, I'll take the release paper off of there as well, and then I'm ready to assemble all my elements onto my tag. So I'll start by putting this piece up towards the top. Then I see that I went over the edge a little bit, but that's okay because we're going to trim that off anyhow. You can trim that off at any point. And then we'll put our circle element. Okay, so an easy way to trim that is to flip it over, and now you can see all the elements that are sticking over. So I am going to leave that circle elements whole, and I'm just going to trim off the other parts there. So now that our tag is done, I've just made everything flush to the edge. And then that's the first tag there. And then in your package you'll have a piece of twine, so you can go ahead and use that twine, or if you have extra at home, just to make the little tag on the top. And so that's how we did the first tag. And now we're just going to move on to the second tag. So for our second tag, we have that plain background, and we're going to use the same paper. So you do get 2 sheets, so you definitely have enough to do more than 2 tags. We did give you an extra tag in the package there, so you have enough to do. So I'm just going to use the same sheet, and I'm going to cut my tag the same, my patterned paper the same as my tag again. So I'm just going to line that up, and if you don't feel comfortable doing this, you can always trace the tag and then cut it out. I'm just going to line it up and cut it out right away. In the little corner here. All right. And so now I just want to move the tag just a little bit down, or the patterned paper just a little bit down, so that you can see the tag on the top. And then I will also want to cut it a little bit short. So what I'm going to do is just, I'll flip it over and cut this end off first. And then I know just to cut off another about the same width that I just cut off. So this is, you could always skip this step and have your tag the same as the background. I just want it just to be a little bit smaller so that you can see the craft paper in the background. So now that I have that element done, I'll bring in my blending piece of paper again, and my smoothie, and I'm going to go ahead and blend those, blend a little bit of ink on the edges there, just so that it's not just so plain and just craft paper. So you want a little bit of, just adds a bit of dimension and stuff. So I'm also going to do that to the patterned paper. Just adding a little bit of ink along the edges, just to give that a bit of dimension so it's not so plain. And then another element that we did add with, that I added onto the background here, I used the texture stamps from Marianne Design. So I used the Crackle one, and we're going to go ahead, I'll show you how I use that. So, just going to get my giant acrylic block. I'm going to put that on there, and I'm going to ink that up. So I'm just going to ink that up with my VersaFine Claret, and the color I'm using today is Fallen Leaves. So I'm just going to turn that over and stamp that down onto my background here. So the trick with stamping on acrylic blocks is you want to give that a second to absorb into your paper. So you're going to stamp that down, give it a good firm press, and then give it a couple of seconds to absorb into that paper. Again, just stamp it down, press, wait a couple of seconds, and there we go. So now I did miss the center of the stamping there, but with all the elements on the front, that's not really going to be a concern. So I think I'm just going to leave it just like that, and then move on to doing a sentiment here. So for the sample in this video, what I'm going to do is show you that stamp set that I stamped the You're the Best for. And here's the sentiment stamp. It comes with other sayings that I think are really good for Father's Day or any sorts of cards that you're making. They're very positive and a little upbeat and stuff like that. So a really good sentiment stamp to have in your collection. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to bring in that strip that we tore our You're the Best from, and I'm going to use my stamping platform for this one just to make sure that I have it stamped nice and solid. If I have to stamp it again, then there won't be any problem lining that up. So I'm just going to put my piece of paper in the corner and then use some magnets. And I'm going to use the sentiment stamp here that says Yahoo. So I'll just peel that off and place that onto my craft paper here. I can close the door to pick that stamp up, and then I'm going to go ahead and ink that and stamp it down. And so when you're using a stamping platform, if it's necessary for you to stamp twice, then you know that you can always stamp in exactly the same spot. So as long as you have your paper lined up in the corner, you can always stamp again, and it should stamp in exactly the same spot. The trick is to have your paper lined up right in the corner so that when you go to stamp again, it'll all line up. So I did stamp twice, didn't really have to, but I just wanted to show you how awesome that is. So that's going to be the sentiment for our second tag. And I'll just take my scrap piece of paper away here. So I have the other sheet of patterned paper that I started cutting because I thought it was recording, but all I did was measure my tag and cut that out again, and then I went for a random tear. So just like the first one, we're just going to do a random pattern on our tag. So here I have just torn out the edge so that I have the torn part just like the sample on the bottom. And then I will use my circle element here. And then with my sentiment, I'm just going to cut that on an angle right underneath the Yahoo. And again, I will just cut off the top here just so that it's not so, maybe I will put the sentiment here on the bottom. So what you want to do is just a layered effect, and really doesn't have to be exactly the same as the sample. So you will have, everyone will have different circle elements, and everyone will have different patterned paper. So nobody's tag is going to look the same, but at the same time it'll have the same effect. So for this tag, I'm just going to take my smoothie and add a little bit of color onto that sentiment there, just so that it's, again, not so clean and crisp. We want it to look a little bit tattered. Now what I'm also going to do is take my my tool here, and this just is going to add that little bit of frayed on the edge as well. So again, I'm going for that tattered look. I don't want it to be clean and crisp. And I'm going to do that as well on this torn part. Again, on this side, I'll also take my smoothie that's full of ink and then just add a little bit of ink along the edges there. So that's just giving it a nice, you know, worn look. And then I will put my sentiment on top, and then my old car race element there. Okay, so now we're just ready to assemble, and I'm going to again use some tape to assemble all my parts. So I'm going to flip everything over and get my tape. So you can definitely use glue for this stage if you're more comfortable using glue. I like to use tape or sticky specs. I'm not a big fan of glue these days, just because I find it really does get everywhere. So you'll see me using sticky specs and tape during these videos. And so I'm just going to line that up and adhere that. I will put some tape on the back of my other set, torn strips, and my sentiment. And then on the back of my circle element, I will use the foam tape again. Okay, so now we're just ready to assemble. So I'm just going to take the release paper off the back. Again, if you like, you can always use your pokey tool to help get that release paper off. It's a little trick that really helps. Okay, so for my elements, I'm going to put this one a little bit higher up here, and then I'll put my sentiment down near the bottom, and then I will put my circle element at the top. I'm then going to hang that off the edge again. And then I forgot to use my hole punch there, just to punch a hole in the center. Again, if you don't have a hole punch, you could always run it through your die cut with the smallest circle die that you have. And then we're going to just tie the tag up at the top. So there is the tag I made today with you. Here is my sample tags. So I just want you to see all the different options that you can do and to make your tag unique and your own. Thank you for joining me for the men's tags. Don't forget to stay tuned at 10:45 for our hourly draw and demo, as well as at 11 o'clock our second card video.